Now we are joined from Paris by the director of the EU ASEAN Centre and former World Bank advisor, Meher Nicolas Fursley. Welcome back to Q News. Thanks for being there with us. So why do you think the IMF emphasises the importance of Asia reducing trade barriers and strengthening regional integration? And how could such measures influence the region's economic stability and growth prospects?
Delighted to join you today from Paris. It's a very good question. The thing is, in Roman law and Roman political science, when a lawyer pleads in the interest of, he pleads in the interest of his own home or his own house or his own interest, it's called pro domo plea. And that's exactly what the IMF is doing. So what the IMF is doing quasi-robotically, they're preaching the gospel of open borders, open market, wave the magic wand of neoliberal free trade, and everything will magically, naturally becomes better in the future. That kind of preaching today is difficult, because that gospel of, open the borders, lower the tariffs, integrate regionally, that was the official gospel pretty much for the past 45, 50 years, and it worked. So what I'm coming at, and I'm saying sarcastically, is like what the IMF preached was the dominant ideology the world over. But in the past 8 months, something new happened. Trump entered the White House 8 months ago, and once again, the second Trump presidency is very different from the first one. Why? Because in the first Trump presidency 8 years ago, the Republican Party was dominated by that sort of IMF neoliberal worldview. Today, Trump completely got rid of the Republican old guard. He can spread his wings. So what is Trump doing, and what are the Chinese doing today? They are pursuing what I would call neo-Colbertism or industrial economic nationalism. That's officially the American policy for since the month of February this year, or if you want, since the month of April this year, 6 months ago, when Trump launched his Trade Liberation Day. And it's no coincidence, I was in Washington, D.C. that week. It was very baroque because he decided to tease the IMF to launch his trade liberation move right before the beginning of what they call the IMF spring meetings. It was a slap in the face of IMF orthodoxy. What I'm coming at is Trump and the Chinese, Chairman Xi Jinping, they speak the same language. It's the language of imperial economic nationalism. Colbertism means centralized industrial policy. It means that at national level, in Beijing and Washington, big business has to work hand in hand with big government, right? So it's an alliance of centralized nationalist big government and the CEOs of the NASDAQ, S&P 100 companies, and it's exactly what the Chinese are doing. So those who play the neoliberal game, the IMF game, and that would be Britain and the European Union, they are on the losing side of history today. They're being crushed by America and China. They're being crushed with tariffs. Ursula von der Leyen on the 29th, 30th of July, she yielded to Trump. Now the Europeans have to swallow 15% tariff, but more than that, the Europeans agreed to invest, to force private sector, French and German and Italian companies to invest trillions of dollars in the coming years in building new factories in Tennessee, Oklahoma, Kentucky, not in Europe. And they are being crushed technologically by China and America. There was a very interesting data point for the policy nerds like me yesterday. The Chinese published the latest figures from their most advanced high-speed rail train prototype. And now they have high-speed rail prototypes in Beijing, which can drive at 900 kilometers per hour. That would be 600 miles per hour. That's more than twice the fastest prototype they have in Berlin and Paris. So that's crazy when you think of it.
Wow.
So all that together, I think IMF orthodoxy is not very popular today. And ASEAN, so Asia is in the middle, right? Asia is in the middle, if you will, between Europe and Britain, who still believe in the gospel of open market neoliberalism and the economic nationalism of China and America. And because ASEAN is in the middle, they're hesitant. They don't really know what to do. And maybe that's why the IMF is preaching their gospel to them.
It sounds fascinating. Tell us about that vehicle again. 900 miles an hour, did you say?
900 kilometers.
Kilometers an hour. That's almost an aeroplane, isn't it? I mean, that's almost an aeroplane speed. That's craziness. I think comparatively in London, they're still doing horse and cart. But let me ask you.
Precisely 580 miles an hour. It's a prototype. So what does it mean? So it will not run before 2 or 3 years, but still it's an incredible speed.
Okay. Well, let me ask you, could the reversal of a weak US dollar and the rising interest rates there impact Asia's economic resilience, do you think?
So now we have everything is relative. Like in finance, nothing is absolute, everything is relative. So we have a relatively soft dollar, which is relatively good for Asia within limits, right? Within limits, it is not bad. It is not bad. I think if the dollar was stronger, it would put more pressure on the ASEAN. So I think the ASEAN now, they're a bit nervous. They're a bit nervous because they're hesitant, right? Because America, after all, is the one who preached the gospel of free trade and liberalization. And for the past 6 months, Trump has said the complete opposite of what the previous 6 US administration were telling the Asians. So I think the Asians are hesitant. They don't want to antagonize China, but they don't want to antagonize America either. So they're trying to find via media. So what they're trying to do right now is to come up with a middle-of-the-road solution, which would allow them to trade with China. Why do they want to trade with China? Very simply because today, to make a long story short, in 60% or 70% of economic and industrial sectors, China is ahead of the rest of the world. So, for example, if you are Indonesian or Malaysian, if you want a high-speed rail network, if you want a new airport, if you want a new port, it is your interest as an Indonesian or Malaysian to deal with China, right? But at the same time, America is still the biggest consumer market. And so they're trying to find a middle-of-the-road solution to do business with China. And they are completely on board of China's New Silk Road. So basically, the New Silk Road may be unpopular in Washington or London or Brussels, but that notion of a giant transportation and energy infrastructure grid is very popular across Asia, even in India, which is China's rival. So to make a long story short, what they're trying to do, it's complicated, is to find a middle-of-the-road solution. Of course, they are submitted, the Europeans, which are largely aligned with America when it comes to isolating China, the Europeans are pressuring ASEAN member states to move away from China.
Well, let me
ASEAN has been maintaining that middle-of-the-road stance.
Okay, well, let me just ask you about America and the latest US inflation data and also the prospects for this government shutdown. It's causing problems all over, and it's just starting to be felt by people in the United States. What economic risks might arise if this gridlock continues?
So it is miraculous because, most experts said that if the shutdown lasts more than 10 days or 2 weeks, the sky will fall and markets will collapse, etc. And to be honest, markets have proven to be quite resilient. Of course, the fact that we have a shutdown, what does it mean? Many US government data gathering, many economic and financial data gathering teams in various American ministries or departments, they are shut down. So we don't have as many data coming from Washington because, many ministries are closed or many departments don't have the resources to do their job. But we have inflation. So the inflation figures published, I think, 2 hours ago were quite good. So on an annualized basis, ending September 2025, we are at 3.0, precisely 3%, which is slightly better, which means slightly lower than expectations. So most experts believed that inflation would be higher, 3.4, 3.3%. The fact it's only, quote unquote, 3.0% is good in relative terms, all the more because the main reason why there was a bit of inflation is energy prices, and so since then they have come down.
I've got about 20 seconds for you, Nick, if you could.
So on the whole, quite good. So on the whole, with all his faults, all the mistakes he makes, etc., etc., I think Trump's record is quite good. There's only one indicator which he cares about. It's the NASDAQ, and the NASDAQ keeps on rising.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Meher Nicolau-Fursley joining us here on Q News. Always a pleasure. Director of the EU ASEAN Centre. Thank you very much for joining us from Paris.